These are human beings, and this is like their livelihood. If we aren't taking and collecting data with like extreme seriousness, we could be making a decision that could negatively impact their future.
Anna Cruse, welcome to VALDCAST.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, no, we're
excited to be here in Dallas too.
Exactly. Yeah. For those listening remotely and not watching the video, we are here at Elite Performance Training in Dallas, Texas, and we're in the middle of VALDCON X. We snuck away from some of the presentations to record this because Anna was someone that we really wanted to get on and pick her brain about all things sports science. So really, really fortunate to have you on and really excited for the conversation.
This will be fun.
Awesome.
I think.
Yeah, I hope. So, Anna, if there's people listening who aren't familiar with who you are or what you do, maybe give people a brief background on those sorts of things, and then we can kick things off.
Sure. I'm Anna Cruse. I am the Assistant Athletic Director for Applied Health and Performance Science at the University of Utah, which is a title that's much too long. To shorten that for everyone, I direct our sports science department is really what that boils down to. But I have some administrative responsibilities as well. We have a staff of 2 right now, but 3 working on hiring the last one that support our sort of broader campus varsity sports, so football and then all of our Olympic sports and basketball. And what we do is just support them from a sports science lens. And I know that means something different to every organization, but we have really great practitioners that we work alongside with. And our job is really, I think we're sort of like the supporters of the support staff. So when we think about it, like our data is impacting all of those different areas, sports medicine and sports performance and nutrition and mental health. And it's really our job to take all of the things that we're collecting and make them usable for all those departments and to be part of that process with them too. But really, we don't always have I think sometimes we get caught up, like we're kind of like the back end people, and we do have front facing roles, but we don't train the athletes and we don't treat the athletes and we don't have consultation with the athletes from a medical perspective or performance related perspective. So what we deal with in the background is, all that information that comes from all those sessions. But I think it's always hard to showcase value in that regard because you don't have like a tangible thing, right? We're building all and putting together all the information in a usable format so that all of our other practitioners can use it to their advantage and leverage that to optimize performance. But that was kind of long-winded for what we do, but that's sort of how I view our space at Utah, is just being supporters of our groups. And we lead some of those performance teams as well. But yeah, it's I think sports science is interesting because it doesn't have that like really tangible thing. It's like people can't quite always picture what it means. And I think you have to ask someone what sports science means to their organization because it does look different everywhere. But
yeah, it's funny. I've heard a bunch of different analogies. The one that I feel like am most fond of at the moment is if you're going to build a house, you need a lot of different tools. You need a bunch of different actual, structural materials and all these sorts of things. You can think of, everybody within the performance department as building or as people that are constructing certain areas of the house and things like that. Where sports science, you're almost like you're constructing the materials that build the house. Like you're the person that builds the bricks themselves, or you're the person that like gets the wood into the facility or something like that, where it's like you said before, you're the support staff of the support staff, which again does not always make it the most enticing role sometimes, because sometimes you're the one staying late and making sure that there are the non-sexy topics of systems in place so that people can follow the correct protocols so that everybody's life is easier. But no, that's really cool. I'd be curious to hear when you're saying, okay, sports science means different things to different departments and to different people. You've been not just a part of Utah your entire career, you've been in other areas. How is what you guys are doing at Utah differ from other areas that you've been in other sports science facilities and departments that you've been working in?
Yeah, I think Utah is by far the most collaborative space, especially at like large scale, like thinking collegiate athletics, not necessarily, an MLS team where everyone's really focused on the same team and environment. A lot of our practitioners have multiple roles. So you might support volleyball and track and tennis instead of just being the volleyball strength coach or the volleyball athletic trainer. Like you have other roles that are pulling from your time. And I think what Utah does really well is we just have sort of organically, I think, over the last, I don't know, I've only been there 4.5 years, but from what I hear over the last 10, 15 years with the people who have come through our organization, just sort of built a culture and recruited people who aligned with our culture of basically not having silos. So every single one of our teams has a performance team, a sports performance team. We call them SPTs. And it consists of a sports scientist, a strength coach, an athletic trainer, a sports psychologist, and a dietitian. And every single one of our 19 varsity sports has a group that's supporting them from a, holistic health, wellness, performance related space. And they are collaborative with our coaching staffs as well. And I think that there's, all of those teams are meeting on a regular basis. There's frequently communication. I think people aren't afraid to share ideas that might be adjacent to their lane. Like we're not all staying so rigidly in our lane. It's like the culture sort of welcomes the psychological safety to be able to share, oh, well, I saw this. Like, what do you think about that? Even if I'm saying something that maybe more is strength and conditioning related, I don't think there's that strength coach is saying, oh, I feel offended that you're trying to change my program. It's more like, we're all here. We have the same goal. We want to support the student athlete. We want to support performance for that team. We want to win championships. Like the goal is the same across all our departments. So I think there's a really nice understanding of that, and we can, move forward in collaborative ways instead of just trying to like bang our heads against the wall, trying to do something, but the rest of our performance team isn't aligned with that. So it's just really nice alignment, collaboration,
definitely
in our space.
Yeah, I really like that. I think, diving a little bit into the nitty gritty of what sports science is and things like that. We kind of had a conversation off camera previously, just kind of on, hey, when something changes, when stuff, you have a plan set forth and something doesn't go according to that. What is the need from the sports science staff, or how do you guys maintain some sort of a flexible nature or flexibility in how you are approaching, whether it's testing, whether it's making sure that technology is in the right space at the right time and people are trained well enough to use that tech. What happens when something doesn't go according to plan? What do you guys do to adapt to those sorts of situations?
Are we talking like logistically or in terms of like a result of a test, or?
Let's do one of both. So let's approach things logistically and saying, okay, what are the systems in place that need to be flexible and how those things change? And then let's say you are collecting or you're delegating responsibilities to somebody who's collecting data, and maybe the data isn't collected in the same way that you're used to.
Okay. I'm going to go back to the first one. I think all of our systems have a little bit of flexibility built into them. If we're not adaptable, then we're not really going to survive in the collegiate athletics space, especially in recent years. Everything has sort of been adaptable. I think we can approach it from just like a maybe load monitoring perspective. That's sort of where my brain goes first. I think we've built really amazing relationships with all of our sport coaches on campus. And so, we might be working with a volleyball coach and we sit down together, like our head coach, Alyssa Dorico, and I sat down, and at the end of last season, she transitioned to a head coach role. Our previous head coach retired after 36 seasons, which was, an incredible legacy. And now we're just sort of transitioning into this like new growth. And so we sat down, and this is happening among all of our teams at Utah that we like directly support from a sort of load monitoring, periodization, planning perspective. But I needed to know her goals and
she needed to know my goals. Like she's an expert in the volleyball space and she trusts me as an expert in the sort of sports science, physiological and physical development space. And so we sit down and we sort of merge our plans together. That doesn't mean that she's going to hit, the volume, intensity, density that we want to hit every single day, but it allows us to be flexible in that sort of system that we build around training for that sport specifically and say, oh, you went way over today, but you had to from a volleyball perspective. So how do we adjust that system moving forward? And how do things change? Instead of like being really rigid and it's like, well, you messed up. It's like, oh, well, that's okay. We know and sort of plan for those backup situations so that, we can still be really prepared for our game on Friday, Saturday, even though we maybe jumbled what we were supposed to do at the beginning of the week. And that's like a kind of a simple example, but I think all of our systems sort of function like that. We're going to baseline or we're going to retest some of our field tests for football on Monday. And we went from 3 groups to the one big group. And now we just have to readjust and make sure that we have, the bandwidth and people there to get the work done that we're going to do in a different format, in a completely different format. I mean, that's in 3 days from now. So I think all of our systems and sort of workflows are flexible, but they're still in place. We still know like the goals for all of these things. It's just like, we don't have to get there in the exact same way every time. From a testing perspective, I think especially when we're looking at data that might be like slightly off because an intern tested, we don't find ourselves in those situations very often. We've done really great things in the last year, all thanks to Gretchen Thompson, who is our assistant director of sports science at Utah. She's been incredible in sort of setting standards based on industry, based on research of, how we collect our data and how we translate that and analyze that into, information, thinking normative data as well. And so like that system, it looks like this like huge onboarding process for us at the beginning of every semester with new strength interns and new sports science interns and new strength coaches that are coming in, new athletic trainers. And so I'm going to talk about this tomorrow at VALDCon, but really sitting down and thinking about, okay, what's our methodology that makes the most sense for, our environment, our area? Like we're obviously not in a lab setting. So innately we have to be flexible and adaptable. Would it be great to get lab grade results on every athlete? 100%. But do we get that? No. So I think it's all about sort of creating, again, like a system that has flexibility in it and that like we don't have time to wait 30 seconds between trials on the force plate. So like how short can we get while still maintaining the validity and reliability of, our sort of lab grade standard, if you will, of the 30 seconds between each trial. And then we train all of our staff members. So we do onboarding education we're like teaching them about the force plates. What is it? What's a load cell? Like all of the, intricate details in, language that they can understand. And then, talking about metrics and how we can use it and making sure that, we're collecting it for good reasons. And then they all have to practice. Like they have homework and they go home or not home, but they come in and they have to test each other. And our interns, we have like certain requirements they have to hit and they have to tag all their tests. And so we have like some quality assurance built in there. So I think, hopefully we don't get to those spaces where we have athletes that we're getting sort of weird test results from, because like in that standard operating procedure that we've so meticulously written with pictures and everything, there's cueing information too. So we're all sort of speaking the same language and we're talking to the athlete about what the test is, why we're doing the test, like how they're supposed to perform the test. But, there's always, the 1 or 2 off tests and it happens. And so I think for us, like being really meticulous in our back end, where we're analyzing data and trying to assign criteria to find outliers. And then it's just like, unfortunately, we have to do the test again. Yeah. And that's just sort of how it goes. And I think you have to be okay with that because that's this situation and environment that you're in. So think, did I get them all?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
you crushed it. And I mean, the funny thing too is like the comparison is always, the lab-based setting and those sorts of things. But I think a lot of times we forget, like, if you've done research before, like, you also have to retest because things aren't always collected well. So it isn't always, the same, super pretty, pristine, lab-based setting. Like if a lot of times research labs are, similar to the sports science, like the true applied environment where, okay, cool. We learned that cueing is a little bit different and we need to make sure that we're staying consistent when it comes to what we're saying to each and every athlete, because the results are going to be changed. And for the researchers, that affects peer review and that affects like the validity of their paper. Mm-hmm. But for you guys, it affects, is this person ready to play or not? Or is this person safe to continue on with training, or what training needs to happen next? And so it's like the same ideas, but the applications of them are quite different.
Yeah. And I think that like there's this sort of gravity in our space with concerning data hygiene and like really clean data collection, that like these are human beings and this is like their livelihood. They're here for a reason. This is their job. And mm-hmm. a lot of them now are being paid to do their job beyond a scholarship and, room and board. They're being they're paid more than I am to mm-hmm. do their job. And so like, if we aren't taking and collecting data with like extreme seriousness, we could be making a decision that could negatively impact their future. And I think if you as a practitioner aren't feeling that, like you might want to do some reflecting mm-hmm. because you wouldn't want the situation to be flipped and it be willy-nilly. Oh, like this guy looks ready to go, but he's not ready to go because we didn't collect the data correctly, or, we're holding someone back who is completely ready due to, whatever factors are happening in the testing. But like, that's something that like Gretchen and I talk about often, is just like this. And with our interns too, we have a sort of horde of interns that help us out with everything that we do. But like this isn't just a number on a page. Like this is a person. This is their life that, you have to take really good care of that.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And so let's say that person, or that number on a page is, it's changing. It's going up, it's going down. It's whatever is happening based on that athlete's physiology and the training loads that they're applied to. How do you guys go through the process of saying, okay, for this athlete at this time, based on this load, this change is significant? Because there's a lot of factors that go into that. And a lot of times people can just kind of, read a paper or take something and be like, 10% difference when it comes to an asymmetry, or even a performance change of 10%. That seems like something happened. So maybe that's our flag and that's what we're going to use. And then people take that and run with it, so that now volleyball's at a 10% threshold, football's at a 10% threshold, soccer's at it, and so what is the process that you guys run through when it comes to, okay, standard asymmetry for this athlete group is X, a significant change would probably indicate this. Is this based on, athlete specific, personal averages? Is this based on group based data? Like, how are you guys going through that process?
Not alone. So the performance team that works with all of our teams, I think that a lot of this we're doing together. We want to make sure that we have like all of the little bits of context that might be impacting that. So from a normative perspective, we've had Vald products for quite a while. And so we have like quite a bit of data on our athletes from all of those different spaces. If we don't have data, we are, falling back on the literature. And I think something that we're working on from an asymmetry perspective, certainly not perfect or done yet, but really trying to identify ranges individual to that athlete. And so if we don't have specific athlete data, if they're freshmen coming in or transfer coming in, we're going to fall back on other sort of norms that we have for a position group or a team or, gender, whatever that might be. And then, but if we do have data on that athlete, like we're trying to understand, what's the sort of threshold range for asymmetry, for instance, that athlete can sort of waver in. And, or, are we is that athlete increasing beyond that range? Has it been in the same direction? And, like if that's a flag for us, we're not just saying like, this athlete has a flag. It's like a conversation with our sports medicine group. It's a conversation with our strength coach. It's a conversation with our dietitians. Like they might have DEXA information that can help us support that. So I would say that we're not necessarily making any sort of decision on one data point. It's like we're trying to be really collaborative in the information that we're using. The overlooked things are like, did that athlete try on the test? Like, are we seeing a 10% increase or decrease because they didn't try today or they didn't try last week because, they were having like a really hard mental day, or, because they just felt apathy that day, or they don't know that they don't have buy-in on our test. Like, I think there's all these other sort of subjective pieces that are really hard to quantify. Like I can't tell you if my athlete gave me 100% intent. That's like really hard to know, but I think the better your buy-in there, the more you can start to trust that athlete. Like they know what they're doing. They know why it's important. But I would say that like from a flagging perspective, one flag is one flag, but like if we're seeing, 10 red flags, like we're going to start thinking about that. But again, not alone. Like those are conversations that we're having among our performance team, involving coaches oftentimes too. Like they might know something about that athlete and their family that like we don't know in our performance team because they don't want to meet with our mental health practitioners, or, but the coach knows what's going on and they have, whatever. Like there's so many extenuating circumstances for all of our athletes. And like, I think again, like if we think about them as like this 10% increase or 10% decrease, and we don't think about all the other things that human beings go through every day, like we're missing something. So holistically is how we do it.
Amazing. No, I like that. My follow-up question there almost revolves around that idea's application to sport itself as well. Like, because when an athlete comes into a sport like that, those mental factors are still there, right? They still could feel apathy. They still could feel upset about whatever's going on with their family. And maybe that measurement is still technically that proxy for the fact of like, okay, they're not focused. And it is correct that they did not give 100% intent. It is totally accurate that they may have been distracted while doing the test, or their buddy was cracking jokes, or whatever it is that's going on, right? But it still could mean, it still could be some sort of an indicator, right? When you bring up you're communicating with the coaching staff, how are you communicating some of these results to these coaches as well? Is this, just downloadable reports and hey, here you go. Like this is what we're seeing. What does that sort of dynamic look like?
We won't give our coaches a report unless we've sat down with them and gone through every single thing on the page. So they don't get a printable thing or, numbers in an Excel sheet, or, we use Teamworks AMS. So, they don't get access to that until we've sat down and gone through what every single thing means, and given them time to ask questions and like really understand what they're looking at. Because I think it'd be so easy to misconstrue something. It's like, I think it happens a lot with like player load values from Catapult, that this person isn't working hard because their like load number is lower. It's like, well, maybe that person has the highest IQ on the field and they're actually a really efficient mover. And this person who has a much higher load isn't in the right spot at the right time. And so they have to like backtrack to get there. And also like they can't run, like their running technique is horrible. And like they're doing all this extra movement to accomplish this task. So like, we want to make sure that we explain those things before it's just like, oh, hey coach, here you go. So I think when we're communicating about athletes, specifically with coaches, like we're sitting down with them and talking about it, not just being like, here's the asymmetry flags, because who knows where they're going to take that. So I think we try really hard to communicate with coaches whenever we can and just not like send them information. Because you just like never know what they're going to do with that information. And we want to make sure that it also aligns with the sport. And usually they have something to say about it. So like usually they can provide some context, or they've seen things on the court that can help us understand maybe what's going on. So.
Yeah, I like that. I'm coming into this conversation mostly from a rehab background, right? I'm a PT by trade, used to do a little bit of S&C coaching in the collegiate environment. So I have, I feel like I know just enough to be dangerous in the field and nothing more. But from a rehab side of things, a lot of times, you go through PT school and they kind of sit you down and you talk about, these are kind of the general principles of rehab. You want to make sure the painful symptoms or whatever symptoms the athlete's feeling are somewhat calmed down. You want to establish some sort of baseline when it comes to range of motion. If strength testing is available to you, you want to make sure you're doing that. And then from there, you slowly start integrating, further and further, either testing or layering complexity when it comes to some of the exercise selection. These sorts of principles, are generally applicable to most rehab cases. In your opinion, or in your experience, what are those equivalent principles in a sports science realm?
That's a good question. I mean, I guess I really I would pull back and think about the foundation that a good sports science program is built upon. For us, that's one, all the data hygiene components that we talked about. So if we're going to collect information, is it collected in a clean way? Because you can clean as much as you want on the back end, but if you didn't collect it in a clean way, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And then I think only collecting information that answers a question. So not starting with the technology, but really going back and starting with the question. This is called sports science for a reason. And everyone learned this scientific method in, whatever grade that was for you, pretty young in your lifetime. So we always want to make sure that we're starting with the question or problem and not the other way around, because then it's we're combing through data, but we don't know what we're looking for. And then I've talked about collaboration every question that you've asked me. And I think that's another sort of pillar of our foundation, is that we can't operate alone. We're not the practitioner. We're not actually the people who are going to utilize the information to inform the decision that they're making. We definitely help in some cases, but again, there has to be relationships with all of those other individuals. And then I think, if I'm going to consolidate this to 4, it would be relationships and sort of buy-in from the athlete. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, that's who we care about, the athlete, the team sort of around the athlete. But we want to make sure that, they are involved in the process too, I think. And that they're not just sort of a lab rat, because that's not what they are. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, 100%.
Did I hit on what you were trying to get at?
Yes, no, I think it was a great response too, because it, like you said before, there are key themes that were brought out throughout every answer in the question, throughout this entire conversation, essentially, of, hey, collaboration is probably number one, right? If you have buy-in from other individuals within the, your performance team, then you guys can at least come to the same conversation, knowing where each individual's strengths and weaknesses are. And then also, I think the biggest thing when it comes to communication understanding is if we talk about a given metric or a given, concept, you could even just say player load or just load in general. If I have a different definition of load than you do, then we can't have that same 100%. Conversation, right? Mm-hmm. And so that is, the collaboration and communication should, like you're mentioning, be that foundation when it comes to, applicable sports science. Something that I thought was very cool that you mentioned was, I think a lot of times people will picture sports scientists as these people that take data on the back end and do some sort of wizardry. And then they're okay, cool. Now these are these insights. But yeah, your idea of just, collection first as a principle of make sure that you have the right systems in place to collect data cleanly and make sure that it's actually answering a question that you've had beforehand. I think those are some of the 3 main points that you've essentially been talking about this whole time. And so, as a long-winded response, yes, you did answer my question very well.
Good.
We've talked about this a little bit, but there's sports science is this interesting domain where a lot of the concepts or new papers that get published seem to get a lot of traction because the research behind it has really good intentions. It's, hey, how can we solve the quote unquote hamstring injury epidemic or whatever people are calling it these days? And so it's very well intended in, how can we make sure the athletes stay on the field for longer? But sometimes it gets, misconstrued in hey, this one metric is going to solve all of our problems or solve everything that we need to do to make sure the athletes are healthy. For many reasons, there's some logical pushback on just using a single variable model for a lot of these things. But at the same time, we had talked off camera beforehand, like anytime there's a season transition or anytime, there's a transition in training load, like injuries tend to increase. So how do you guys figure out this approach of, tracking 100 different variables is going to add too much complexity. You guys aren't going to be able to figure anything out, but using a single, ratio metric probably isn't the answer either. Where do you guys find that balance?
I think we're still working on it. And I would imagine that's a lot of people's answers too. Like, we have some like tried and true things that we use, and I don't think that no one solved this injury question. And if someone does, then they'll be super rich. But I don't think we have answers to that. So I think it's just like being really diligent and sort of relentless, and making sure that what we're collecting makes sense for our population. And it's okay to collect something with the hypothesis that it is going to have an impact, and then say, this didn't really help us, and to like change course. And so I think, we're not going to collect 100 different things, but if we have a question, like to go back to the last answer, if we have a question and we're trying to solve the answer to that question, like, again, like we're still thinking about things scientifically. So like, how can we change or add, one variable at a time, and, being diligent about that and not trying to change 100 different things. But okay, we think this is going to help us answer this question a little bit better than what we were doing previously. And like, I think like science is evolving, and, research evolves. And so like, it's okay for us to evolve too. Like, we don't have to do something because we've always done it that way. So I just think like that we have like a general understanding that like we shouldn't collect 1,000 things and like look for the, points of interest there. Like it's probably not going to work, but like we should use our expertise as practitioners and the, current literature, or like what our colleagues are doing, and like ask questions and like make sure like, we survey our network, because like they might have done it 2 years ago and they answered the same question we're trying to answer, and like they found that this worked really well. So I think it's just like being, deliberate in what we're changing and what we're collecting. And if something's not serving us, then it's okay to move away from it. And like, I don't know, we're just sort of like winding down this river trying to say like, okay, this is really working. Like, what else can we add that might just like get us 1% closer to the answer that we're trying to look at? But I mean, transition periods, like they just inherently come with increases in injury. And that's what we've seen since, our men's basketball, athletic trainer has been at Utah since 1999, and he's collected, like he has a record of every injury that's occurred. And so like when we go and look at that and you like graph it out, it's like very clear that like these specific transition periods are like points of interest across the season elicit, higher stress levels for the athletes. And so we typically see an increase in injury there. But I think it's just like you have to be deliberate in not adding 1,000 different variables, but also like one, Nord-board asymmetry probably isn't enough to make one single decision on. And then, again, the utilization of our team. Like, I'm not the one who's driving this by myself. Like, it's a whole group of us that are thinking about things, and we all have diverse backgrounds. So that was kind of like a vague answer to that, but I don't know that we've solved that.
Yeah. And I don't think anybody has, right?
So we're just trying to do our best with what we have.
What you mentioned before of, you keep what works and you reject kind of what doesn't, and paraphrasing, but how are you making those decisions, and how are you making those determinations of this was helpful, this was not helpful?
Well, the first one is like, if we were trying to answer a question and we collected a bunch of data and then we never looked at it, well, should we have collected it? Like, did we waste our time?
Yeah.
Were we ready for that step? So that's, I think, the first thing. It's like, okay, we went through all this, and like, I think we've tried as like a department, some of the more administrative stuff that I'm doing in my space is with, you know, collaboration from a lot of our sports medicine and strength practitioners, is like looking at what are the demands of each sport are, like common injuries, and like trying to set sort of like tier 1, 2, 3 testing requirements, if you will, for those sports. And to be frank with you, like that was not the best way to do that, because we were basically removing some of the autonomy that those performance teams had around selecting the, like, you know, preseason testing that they were doing. And so like our lacrosse team collected, I don't know how many different like they did so many baseline tests. It was a haul to get it all done. And then like we didn't use half of them. So like that was the wrong way to go about it. Like I'm okay to admit that we made a mistake there. Like we did. We've completely adjusted since then. So that's the first thing. It's like, again, if you don't have a question and it's not going to answer your question, just wait till the question, you know, gets you to that modality or whatever you're doing. And then I think the second one is if like we don't see sort of meaningful change from, you know, a metric, or it doesn't help us get to the answer that we're looking for, is I guess the next step in sort of removing that. If it's not adding value to the information that we're trying to collect, and we can't find, like if we've scoured through that information and we can't find the value that maybe we're hoping for, then it's like, well, let's find something else that works better. And I think we have to be okay with failing essentially in that regard and making mistakes. And that's, again, science is in our title. Like that has to be okay with us. So,
and that's the thing. I think if everything that you're doing and if everything that you're adding is always like, oh, that was a great decision, like you're either not being as reflective as you should be in understanding, like, was that actually a great decision? Or you're very behind the ball on the things that you need to be implementing. So much so that every next decision is, you know, from 10 years ago, and we've already established that's a good thing that you should be doing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Anna, this was an awesome conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think a lot of the listeners will have as well. If there's a way for them to get in contact or to reach out with any follow-up questions, how can they do that?
Yeah. Just get on Google, search up the Utah Athletics staff directory. You'll find me on there. My email's on there. Please feel free to send an email, or LinkedIn, whatever that looks like. But yeah, I'm always happy to talk. I mean, I find a lot of value in our sort of network as practitioners, and we can all learn from each other. And I think that's like hugely important to our philosophy at Utah too. We like thankfully live in like this really nice geographical area that includes pro teams and Olympic NGBs. And so we actually get to have a lot of really fun conversations with those practitioners. And we become better by sharing with each other. So please feel free to connect anytime. Yeah.
Thanks, Anna.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.